The walls of the motel room were thin. Marlene could hear the hum of a vending machine outside and the occasional shuffle of footsteps on the gravel. But inside, it was quiet. Still, she sat on the edge of the bed, holding a worn photo in her hands, her son, maybe 5 years old, missing both front teeth, smiling like he had the whole world ahead of him. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. He told me they were taking me somewhere safe. She paused, staring at the photo. Her fingers trembled slightly. But when the door shut, I realized it wasn't a room. It was a cage. The silence after that sentence was louder than anything else in the room. It pressed into her ribs. She leaned back, letting her head rest against the wall. Her suitcase sat unopened by the door. A half-empty water bottle on the nightstand. A single key on the pillow. Everything felt like it had been decided for her. She had raised him on her own. Worked double shifts. Skipped meals so he wouldn't have to. She gave him everything, her time, her strength, her youth. And now she was too much. Too old. Too slow, too inconvenient. She turned to the camera with eyes that had seen too much, but still burned with quiet strength. Have you ever been treated like a burden by someone you raised? Comment below where you're watching from. And if family ever made you feel disposable, then, softly, because I thought I mattered. Until they put me somewhere to forget me. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden by someone you raised, tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? And has family ever made you feel disposable? And if this story already has your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Because stories like this, they deserve to be heard. It had started over lukewarm tea. Her son Daniel sat across the kitchen table, stirring his cup too slowly, too thoughtfully. His wife Serena perched at the edge of her chair like the conversation was a business meeting she wanted over with. The silence between the clinks of the spoon grew longer. Marlene already knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. "Mom," Daniel began. His tone almost rehearsed. "We've been thinking." That phrase never meant anything good. Serena chimed in, her voice syrupy. "You've been through a lot this year. The surgery, the falls. You're always tired. We just think, maybe you need a break." Marlene blinked. "A break from what?" Serena smiled like it was obvious. "From everything. From the house. The stairs. The bills. The yard. Daniel and I want to help. We found a place really peaceful. You'll have your own space. You'll be looked after." Daniel reached out and placed his hand on hers. "You'll be safe, Mom. Safe." That word hit her like a cold wind. Marlene looked around her kitchen, the faded wallpaper, the chipped counter, the old calendar with circled birthdays and doctor's appointments she still kept track of. She thought of her garden outside, the lavender she'd planted when Daniel was born, the rose bush his father once bought her. Still, she smiled softly. "You think I can't manage on my own anymore?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he gently patted her hand. Serena stood up and began clearing the mugs. Decision made, not discussion, had the next morning. Her bags were packed. Serena had labeled them neatly with masking tape. "Just until you're feeling better," she said. Marlene walked through the house slowly, pausing in doorways, touching walls, as if memorizing the feeling of home. She stepped into the garden. The air was heavy with jasmine. The breeze carried the scent of soil and memory. She crouched down, knees aching, and plucked a small lavender sprig. Daniel honked the car horn. Inside the car. No one said much. Serena was on her phone. Daniel hummed tunelessly to the radio. Marlene held the lavender in her lap like a farewell gift. Her hands trembled, but she said nothing. They stopped by a pharmacy. Serena ran in to get something. Daniel turned to her. "You know, this is best, right? You're too independent for a nursing home and too fragile to live alone. This place we found. It's safe." That word again, safe. They drove for nearly an hour. Marlene stared out the window, watching the city fade into warehouses and cracked roads. When they pulled into the industrial parking lot, she thought it was a mistake, but no one corrected it. Daniel helped her out of the car and grabbed her bags. Serena unlocked the padlock on Unit 2 for B. "There's a cot. A little kitchenette. You won't need much." It's just temporary, Daniel said. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The lavender sprig slipped from her fingers onto the concrete. The door creaked. The metal rolled down. Darkness swallowed her. Marlene sat on the cot for a long time. Bags at her feet, the scent of motor oil and mildew in the air. There was a single light bulb overhead and a small fan that barely worked. The floor was concrete. No windows. No clock. She had her medication. A jug of water. 2 sandwiches. It took her a full hour to process what had happened. She'd been stored, not protected. Not cared for, stored. They called it safe. Marlene had always trusted Daniel's hands on the wheel, even now. As they passed mile after mile of unfamiliar roads, she told herself, he knows what he's doing. The buildings outside the window changed from grocery stores to gas stations, then from neighborhoods to nothing but warehouses and chain-link fences. Her lavender sprig had fallen somewhere in the back seat. Forgotten. Daniel didn't say much. Serena sat beside him, scrolling her phone, eyes barely glancing up. The silence grew heavier with every mile. But Marlene didn't ask where they were going. Not yet. Eventually, Daniel pulled into a lot behind a long row of gray metal doors. Industrial storage units, not a tree or bench in sight. Only gravel, rust, and dust. We're here, he said. Serena jumped out first, adjusting her jacket like she was late for something more important. Daniel opened Marlene's door, then reached into the trunk and grabbed her bags. Marlene stepped out slowly, unsure if she was misreading the signs. This isn't a facility. Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's just temporary, Mom. We cleaned it up. Put in some stuff to keep you comfortable. He walked her toward one of the units, 27B, and unlocked the latch. The metal door screeched upward. Inside was space, bare concrete walls. A small couch with a floral sheet draped over it. A space heater. A folding chair. A few crates stacked like shelves holding cans of soup. A roll of toilet paper. And a plastic basin. Her chest tightened. There's no bed, she whispered. Daniel gestured to the couch. It pulls out. You just have to jiggle it a bit. Serena leaned in, trying to soften the blow. We brought blankets. And there's a little portable toilet in the corner. It's clean. Marlene blinked. But no bathroom? No windows. Daniel looked at the sky. It's just a couple of days, Mom. We're getting things sorted. The other place wasn't ready yet, but I thought we were going to a care facility. He scratched the back of his neck. There were delays. You know how it is. Marlene turned and looked at the open gravel lot. No other cars. No people. Just silence and steel. She took a slow step into the unit. It smelled like bleach and old cardboard. Daniel set her bag down beside the couch. We'll come check in soon, all right? Serena added, don't open the door too much. People steal out here. She handed Marlene a flip phone. Only calls out to us. We'll charge it when we visit. Marlene stood frozen. Her hand gripped the armrest of the couch. You're leaving me here. Daniel didn't answer. He just kissed the top of her head. It's for your safety. That word again, safe. The door came down before she could stop it. Before she could ask again. Before she could process what was happening. Thud, then click. A lock turned on the outside for a few seconds. She didn't move, just stood staring at the rippled metal door, waiting for the sound of footsteps walking back, waiting for the door to rise again, waiting for a laugh. A just kidding, a sign that this was a mistake, that they'd taken a wrong turn, that she hadn't just been left inside a cage with canned soup and a lawn chair. But no sound came. Her legs gave out first. She sank onto the couch, the thin cushions offering no comfort. The heater buzzed to life in the corner, a faint hum in the cold air. Her hands trembled. She looked around, trying to find something familiar. There was nothing. Even the photo of her and Daniel, the one she'd seen on his mantel for years, was gone. It hadn't made the trip. She reached for her purse. Her wallet was gone. Only her ID remained. She searched through the bag, no keys, no charger, no watch. She had been emptied. The panic began to rise in her chest, crawling up her throat like smoke. She pressed her hand to her heart, but she didn't scream, not yet. Instead, she stood and walked slowly to the crates. Soup, crackers, bottled water, nothing sharp. Nothing glass. She understood. Then, this wasn't oversight. This was intention. They'd planned this. She sat again, breathing slowly, deliberately. The light bulb above flickered once, then steadied. A spider moved across the far corner of the ceiling. Weaving. Marlene reached for her bag again, pulling out one thing she'd tucked away almost by accident before they left her late husband's old dog tags. They clinked together in her palm, cool and familiar. She closed her hand around them. No tears yet, no collapse, just stillness. Because somewhere beneath the numbness, beneath the betrayal, something ancient in her had woken up. A woman who had survived childbirth, a house fire, 2 recessions, and the loss of the only man who ever truly saw her would survive this too. But not silently, not this time. The first hour felt like a mistake. Marlene sat still on the edge of the old couch, her knees stiff, her heart thudding with a quiet rhythm. She stared at the metal walls of the unit. Nothing moved. No sound but the faint humming of the space heater struggling. In the corner, like a tired whisper, she told herself it was just for a night. Maybe 2. Maybe there had been a delay at the facility. Maybe they were still filling out paperwork. Maybe they'd come back. Any minute now, but the minutes turned into hours. She found the soup cans first. A shelf along the back wall held 3 dusty cans of chicken noodle, a few sleeves of crackers, and a half-empty jug of water. It was deliberate, planned enough to keep her breathing, but not enough to make it feel like home. Her phone gone. She checked her coat pocket, her purse. Nothing. Her house keys had been taken too. She whispered his name, David. It echoed back to her. Too loud in the metal box. It's too sad. To hollow. There was no bathroom. No sink. Just a plastic basin with a towel folded next to it. The humiliation hadn't quite landed yet. Her mind hadn't caught up with her body. She tried to sleep, but the couch springs dug into her hip. Her left leg ached from arthritis. She curled into a ball, tucking her coat around her like armor. She cried quietly, the kind of crying that doesn't need sound. Just tears and breath and disbelief. Daylight came as a faint stripe under the steel door. That's how she kept time. No clocks, no sun. Just a sliver of gray dot. She began counting the days in her notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "I am not gone." It gave her something. Not hope exactly, but shape. If she could name the days, she could survive them. On day 2, the hunger set in. She opened the first can with a dull opener she found beside the heater. The soup was cold, gelatinous, but she ate it. She chewed, slow, conserving. Not just food, energy, identity, dignity. She used the basin as best she could. She changed in silence. Moved in silence. Existed in silence. She started talking aloud. Not in panic. In memory, she told stories to the air. About her childhood in Kentucky. About her mother's sewing machine, the way the needle danced. About the Sunday afternoons, her late husband, Walter, made pancakes for dinner. He made them too big, she said, chuckling. He never listened to the recipe. She began talking to Walter as if he were there. Remember when David scraped his knee? And you carried him like he was glass? I miss the sound of your coffee spoon in the mug. I thought we did better than this. The silence didn't answer back. But it gave her space. On day 4, her stomach cramped. She had rationed the crackers too thin. She tried to sleep again, but every creak in the walls jolted her. She dreamed of her garden. Of roses. Of her son, as a boy, holding a frog in cupped hands and saying, "Look, Mama, he's mine." He had once loved her. She knew that. She had held him through colic, chicken pox, breakups. She had sold her wedding band once to pay his college tuition. And now, a metal box. She looked down at her notebook again. The ink had started to smear, the pen was drying. She used short strokes. Every word mattered. Day 5. My name is Marlene. I'm still me. She began humming old hymns. It is well with my soul. Amazing grace. The melodies filled the cold. Sometimes she paced. 5 steps forward, 5 steps back. Her knees hurt. Her ankles cracked. But moving reminded her she was still alive. On day 6, she wrote her obituary, just in case it wasn't poetic. It was simple. Marlene Jane Walker, mother, wife, reader of stories, grower of tomatoes, fighter. On the 7th day, the water was nearly gone. Her hands trembled when she opened the last can. She didn't cry. Not anymore. The grief had changed shape from sadness to steel. She listened for footsteps outside. Nothing. And then, around what she guessed was 10 a.m., she heard it. A voice, muffled. A man talking to someone. Then silence again. She waited. Breath held. Later that afternoon, the door creaked. But it didn't open. Instead, a folded newspaper slipped under the edge. She crawled to it. It was yesterday's edition, local. The headline read, "Senior Care Crisis. One Family's Generosity Goes Viral." She froze below it, a photo of David and his wife, smiling with boxers. The caption, "Local couple shares story of helping elderly mom find quiet." Minimal lifestyle. Rage bloomed in her chest. He had turned her pain into publicity. She flipped to the back page and wrote 3 words, "I am awake." And, for the first time, she meant it. The 8th day. She didn't eat. She sat cross-legged on the floor, notebook in hand. Eyes on the sliver of light dot, she began to plan, not revenge. A return they had counted her out. Forgotten she was a woman who once survived 3 jobs, 2 miscarriages, and a car accident that cracked her ribs but not her will. She had waited long enough. And when that door opened, if it ever did, they would see someone they thought they buried in dust. But she was only waiting to rise. The cough gave her away. It wasn't loud. More of a rasp that slipped out between cracked lips and a dry throat. Marlene had been trying to stay silent. But after 8 days of cold soup, shallow sleep, and holding in tears that never came, her body had other plans. She was lying curled on the floor when she heard footsteps. Not her son's, not the thudding boots of false kindness. These were softer, slower, a shuffle, followed by the dragging of a mop bucket. Wheels squeaked, but Marlene held her breath. The footsteps stopped near the door. A pause, then a voice. Female, middle-aged. "Hello," the voice said, hesitant. "Was that someone coughing?" Marlene didn't answer. Couldn't. The light under the door dimmed, as if the person leaned close. "Is someone in there?" Still no response. Just the sound of breathing on both sides of a steel door. Keys jingled. The lock turned, and then, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the door opened. A woman with short gray curls and tired eyes stood in the frame, holding a mop in one hand and a janitor's key ring in the other. Her uniform read, "Rita." She froze when she saw Marlene. "Oh my God," Rita whispered. Marlene blinked. Her throat tightened. She tried to sit up, but her limbs trembled. Rita rushed forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Don't move too fast," she said, voice breaking. "You're dehydrated." She grabbed a water bottle from her cart and unscrewed the cap. "Sip slow," she said. "Not all at once." Marlene obeyed. The water tasted like rain. Like memory. Rita looked around the unit, the couch, the soup cans, the basin. "Who did this to you?" she asked softly. Marlene's voice finally returned. It was weak but steady. "My son," she said. "He said it was temporary." Rita's eyes hardened. "You're coming with me?" "No," Marlene said, gripping her coat. "Not yet. I need to make a call." She reached inside the lining of her jacket, where an old paper address book was hidden. Folded, yellowed with age. She flipped past entries written in faded ink. Cousins, neighbors, doctors, long retired. And then she stopped on one. Raymond Walker, cousin Walter's side. Sheriff retired. She looked up at Rita. "Do you have a phone I could borrow?" 10 minutes later, they sat in the janitor's break room behind the warehouse. Rita had slipped her through the back door. No cameras. No questions. Marlene dialed. The line rang once, twice. Then, Ray Walker speaking. She hadn't heard that voice in years. But it hit her like a lighthouse through fog. Ray, she said. It's Marlene. He paused. Marlene, is everything all right? No, she said simply. I think I've been put away. A beat of silence. Then, in a colder tone, where are you? She told him everything. The storage unit. The food. The door. Her son. Ray didn't ask for proof. He said, stay with the woman. I'll be there before nightfall. When she hung up. Her hand shook. Rita poured her a second cup of water. I don't know what to say, Rita murmured. This is beyond anything I've seen. Marlene smiled. Barely. Thank you for unlocking the door. Rita shook her head. No, ma'am. You unlocked it. I just had the key. They didn't speak much after that. But as Marlene sat in the quiet warmth of that small janitor's room, she clutched her address book like scripture. The world hadn't ended. It had simply waited. For a cough. For a woman with a key. For one last number not yet crossed out. Marlene sat on the worn recliner in her cousin Walter's den, her thin hands wrapped tightly around a warm mug of tea. It was the first real comfort she had felt in what seemed like an eternity. The sharp scent of pine cleaner clung to the wood-paneled walls, and the distant hum of the TV played something neither of them were watching. Her body ached, but her mind now that was sharper than it had been in weeks. Walter sat across from her, arms folded, eyes heavy with concern. He had been quiet since picking her up. No questions, just a deep nod when she collapsed into his arms and whispered. He locked me in a storage unit, but now it was time to speak. I had a folder, Marlene said softly. Back at the house, under my mattress. I always kept it there, just in case. Walter leaned forward. What kind of folder? The kind that reminds people I'm not stupid. Or gone, she said, the steel finally returning to her voice. Bank statements, property titles, copies of the will, my pension records, everything. I knew she stopped herself, then corrected. I felt something like this might happen. Not this exactly, but something ugly. Walter nodded slowly. Smart, that file could be exactly what we need. They both looked at Rita, who had been quietly sitting near the door, sipping a bottle of water. She was the only reason Marlene had made it out. A stranger turned savior. I can go get it, Rita offered, setting the bottle down. I know the layout. The back door is usually open around lunch. I won't be long. You'd do that? Marlene asked. Rita smiled gently. I saw what they did to you. I'm not letting them pretend it didn't happen. By late afternoon, Rita returned. Her hoodie was dusted with garden soil, and a leaf clung to her pant leg. But she held the folder like it was gold. Marlene took it with both hands and slowly opened the cover. The pages inside were neatly labeled. House deed, will, bank, pension. Each one a piece of herself she had quietly preserved. Here, she said, pulling out one document and passing it to Walter. This shows I'm the sole owner of the house. It was transferred to me after Richard passed. No joint ownership, no transfer rights to anyone. The house is mine. Walter examined the paper, legal and notarized. This is solid. She handed him another. This is the will. Richard left everything to me with instructions that our son only gets access after I pass, not a day before. And this. She pulled out a folder labeled pension activity. This shows my bank statements over the past year. I didn't notice at first. But look, monthly transfers. Same amount. Going into an account I don't recognize. Walter's expression darkened. That's theft, Marlene. Financial elder abuse. They've been bleeding you dry while telling you to rest. Marlene said nothing. Her silence was confirmation. Walter stood and walked to the phone. I know a lawyer. Good one. Helped me when we sorted out Maureen's estate. I'm calling him. And then I'm calling someone else too. Marlene raised her eyebrows. The county sheriff, Walter said. He owes me a favor. The lawyer's office was just 2 blocks away. The sun was low by the time they arrived. casting long shadows over the sleepy street. Marlene clutched the folder to her chest as they entered the building. Inside, the lawyer, Mr. Harrell, was already reviewing the scanned copies Walter had emailed. "This is airtight," he said, nodding. "It's all here. Property ownership, will, bank records. If what you're saying is true, they've committed fraud, theft, and unlawful confinement." Marlene looked down at her hands. They trembled only slightly now. "Do you want to press charges?" Mr. Harrell asked. Marlene was quiet for a long time. "Then, yes, but not because I want revenge. Because I want it written down. I want it on paper that I mattered, that I wasn't crazy, that they don't get to rewrite what they did." Mr. Harrell nodded solemnly. "We'll file everything tomorrow morning." Back at Walter's house that evening, Rita made soup and Marlene sat with her feet propped up. Wrapped in a soft quilt, her mind drifted back to the moment her son said, "We'll put you somewhere safe." The words had sounded like kindness at the time now. They sounded like chains, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel locked in. She felt free, exhausted, yes. But finally, stepping back into her own story, she pulled the notebook from her coat pocket and added a new line beneath the others. "I remember everything, and now, so will they." The knock came just after breakfast. It was brisk, firm, not the kind of knock that waits. On the other side of the door, Marlene's son glanced up from the couch, a half-eaten bagel in one hand and his phone in the other. His wife peeked through the blinds, then immediately stepped back. "Police?" she hissed. He raised an eyebrow, then strolled toward the door like it was a prank. Maybe a neighbor complaining again? Maybe someone looking for directions. He opened the door with a lazy smirk. "Two officers. One uniformed, one plainclothes. Are you Gregory Sims?" "Depends who's asking," he said, still half smiling. The plainclothes officer stepped forward. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include elder abuse, unlawful confinement, and financial fraud." The smile evaporated. "Excuse me?" "You can speak with your lawyer," the officer said, already slipping a set of cuffs from his belt. His wife stood frozen behind him, eyes wide, hands gripping her phone like it was a life raft. Gregory turned to her, confusion blooming into panic. "Call someone." "This is a mistake." But she didn't move. Not yet. Marlene was at the edge of the property, watching from a car parked just far enough away to stay unnoticed. Beside her sat the cousin retired sheriff, pressed shirt, arms folded.com. He didn't say anything, just nodded once as they saw Gregory being led down the porch steps. It was surreal. The man who had told her she was too old to manage her own life now couldn't even manage the stairs without handcuffs on. Inside the house, his wife started deleting. Social media profiles, photos, shared memories, all vanishing with the frantic swipe of a thumb. But it was too late. Word had already spread. Someone had seen the police car. Another had taken a picture. By afternoon, the neighborhood message boards were full of whispers and shocked reactions. Wasn't that his mother's house? He seemed like such a good son. She always kept her garden so nice. I wondered where she went, but Marlene didn't care about the noise. Not anymore. Hours later, she stepped out of the car in front of her old house. Her steps were slow but certain. Her hand reached for the doorknob, the same one she used to polish every Saturday morning. She turned it. The door opened, no key, no knock, no asking. She walked into the kitchen. The lights were still dim. A dish towel hung over the back of a chair. A coffee cup sat in the sink. There was a scent in the air, not hers. But that didn't matter, because now it was her home again. She placed her coat over the chair, just like she used to. Then she walked to the window above the sink and looked out at the overgrown lawn. The flower beds were bare. The bird feeder was empty. But the sun was shining through the glass, hitting the tile floor the same way it always had. "I'm home," she whispered. No one replied, and yet, for the first time in months, she felt heard. In the days that followed, there were papers to sign, meetings to attend, locks to change. Her lawyer helped ensure every document was airtight. Her cousin checked on her daily, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting in the living room while they watched old westerns. But Marlene, she moved differently now. Slower, yes, but stronger. One morning, she pulled a plastic bin from the closet. Inside were gardening gloves, trowels, seed packets, all untouched since the spring. She took them out one by one, lined them up on the counter. Then she stepped outside. The grass was long but not wild. The roses were gone, but the soil was still good. She knelt down and pushed her fingers into the earth. It was cold, damp, real. As she planted the first bulb, she thought of the storage unit, the silence, the cold metal, the lies. But she also thought of Rita, of the cousin, of the tiny notebook that kept her sane. She thought of the way she had whispered to herself in the dark, "I am not gone." She had been right. Inside the house, her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. It was Olivia, her daughter-in-law, Marlene. "I didn't know he was doing all that. I thought it was just temporary. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk?" Marlene stared at the screen for a long time. Then she powered the phone off. The apology was too late, and too convenient. She walked back inside, wiped her hands, and made tea. That night, as the stars blinked above her newly claimed roof, Marlene sat by the window with a pen and a fresh notebook. She began to write again, not about the pain, but the lessons, the strength, the truth. She titled the page, "The Door They Didn't Expect." And underneath, she wrote, "They locked me away thinking they were done with me. But I was just beginning." The studio lights were warmer than she expected. Marlene sat still in the interview chair, a soft blue cardigan over her shoulders. Hair neatly brushed, hands folded in her lap. She had chosen her outfit with care. Not flashy, not pitiful. Just herself. The calm before the truth. Across from her, the local news anchor gave her a reassuring smile. "We're so grateful you agreed to speak with us, Marlene." She nodded. "I'm not doing it for attention. I'm doing it because silence helped them." The segment began. A montage played first footage of the storage unit, now open and empty. A photo of Marlene from 5 years ago holding a gardening trowel. Then the voiceover. Tonight, a story of survival, betrayal, and a woman who refused to disappear. 74-year-old Marlene Thompson was found locked inside a storage unit by her own son. But what happened next might surprise you. Cut to the interview. The camera zoomed in. Gently as Marlene spoke. "I was told I was being taken somewhere safe," she began. "Somewhere to rest while they handled things, but what they meant was somewhere quiet enough that no one would hear me." The anchor asked gently, "Did you ever imagine something like this could happen?" Marlene paused. "Not from him. I raised him. I gave up years of my life, holidays, sleep, money I didn't have, because that's what mothers do. I never thought I'd have to unraise him." The words landed heavy. The comment section on the live stream exploded. "This woman is incredible. I'm crying. My grandma raised me. How could anyone do this?" "You're not invisible, Marlene. We see you." The anchor leaned forward. "What got you through those days?" Marlene's fingers touched the edge of her notebook, which now sat in her lap. "This," she said, "I wrote every day. Little things, thoughts, memories of my husband. Just reminders that I was still here, that I still mattered." The screen flashed images of her scribbled pages, loops of handwriting that read, "I am not gone, and they do not get the last word. And what would you say to others who feel forgotten?" The anchor asked. Marlene met the camera head on. "Say your own name. Say it out loud. Write it down. Tell the truth, even if your voice shakes. Because if you don't, they'll erase you before you're even gone." A beat of silence passed. Then the screen faded to black. Later that night. The segment aired on the 6 o'clock news, but it didn't stop there. The clip made its way to social media. A journalist tweeted it with the caption, "When they tried to silence her," she wrote, "When they locked her away, she walked back home." #Marlene, the internet did the rest. Within hours, the video had hundreds of thousands of views. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag I am not gone. Hashtag justice for Marlene. Hashtag unerase her people stitched her clip with their own stories' grandmothers, caregivers, even young adults who had witnessed elder neglect. Comments flooded in. My Nana was forgotten. I wish she had spoken like Marlene. Protect your elders. They hold the blueprints of everything. This isn't just a story. It's a warning. Marlene sat in her kitchen the next morning, phone buzzing with notification after notification. She didn't understand all the apps, but her cousin printed out some of the messages and placed them in a folder on the table. I thought the world forgot. It's people like me, she said quietly. Her cousin sipped his coffee. Looks like they're remembering. A letter came in that afternoon, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. You reminded me my mom still matters. Thank you. Marlene placed the letter in her notebook, between the pages that said I am not gone. Later that week, the news station called again. They wanted to follow up. National outlets were interested now. She politely declined. I've said what needed saying, she told them. Let that be enough. And it was. Because the story wasn't about virality. It wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility, about reclaiming a voice that had been boxed in and padlocked, and now the world saw her. The key turned differently now. It was a new lock, one she had installed herself. When Marlene stepped back into the house, she didn't ask permission, didn't pause at the threshold. She walked in like she belonged, because she did. She stood in the kitchen, hands on the counter, breathing in the familiar smell of lemon oil and wood. The space looked the same, but it no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like hers again, and this time no one could take that away. That afternoon, she walked into town with a folder under her arm. She entered the credit union, a place she hadn't visited in years, and asked for a new savings account to be opened. Name on the account. The teller asked. She smiled. Marlene Thompson. And my granddaughter, Lily. The teller looked up. A joint account. No, I'll deposit. She'll receive it when she's ready. And when she's kind, the teller didn't ask further. Just nodded and processed the papers. Marlene left the bank lighter than she'd entered. Her footsteps were steadier. The world hadn't grown softer, but her voice had grown stronger. The next morning, she opened the old garage. It still smelled of rust and forgotten nails. But there was space now. She swept it clean. Made a sign with a marker and cardboard. Community pantry, take what you need. Leave what you can. It started small. A few cans, a bag of rice, a pack of diapers. But word spread. A neighbor dropped off paper towels. Someone else donated apples and bottled water. One morning, a high schooler left a note that read, "This helped my mom this week. Thank you, whoever you are." She pinned it to the wall. The pantry became more than a shelf. It became a symbol that even those discarded could become providers again. That being silenced didn't mean you had nothing left to offer. The days passed, quietly productive. Her fridge was full again, not with expensive meals, but with comfort, soup she liked, bread she could toast, peaches in syrup like the ones her husband used to bring. Home daughter cousin helped her install a new mailbox with her name engraved in brass. Every time she opened it, it reminded her, you live here. You matter here. She began hosting tea for the older women in the neighborhood. Just a few at first. Then more. They brought their stories of sons who vanished, pensions misplaced, voices dismissed. They sat around her table, and for the first time in a long time, they weren't invisible. Marlene listened, then spoke. You are not what they didn't see, she told them. You are everything they forgot to thank. One of them wept into her sleeve, and just like that, her silence was gone, not in a burst, not in a scream, but in the slow, deliberate reclaiming of space. Her son never came back to the house. The court proceedings would take time, but Marlene had already decided this chapter wasn't about what he did. It was about what she was building now. One morning, she opened her notebook, the one she'd filled in the dark, and added a new page. They put me in a box and locked it. I walked out and unlocked myself. She closed the book. The pantry shelves were stocked. The plants by the porch had started blooming again. And her name, in bold print, hung on the mailbox outside, untouched, undoubted, and absolutely hers. The morning air was crisp. Marlene sat on the wooden porch swing of her restored home, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. A ceramic mug sat beside her, its steam curling upward in gentle spirals. It wasn't the coffee that kept her warm. It was something deeper in awareness that she had returned, not just to her house, but to herself. She ran her fingers over the cover of her notebook. It was the same one she had scribbled in during those dark storage unit days each page, a battle cry, a lifeline, a memory preserved in ink. Now she flipped through it slowly, her handwriting changing slightly with each entry, as if her strength had returned word by word in the quiet of the morning. She could hear distant birdsong, the hum of a car passing on the road, and the comforting creak of the swing. She smiled at how much noise silence could carry when it was finally your own. She opened. To the last page, a single line sat there, waiting to be written. But before the pen touched paper, Marlene let her mind wander. She thought about all that had happened, not just the betrayal, the cage, the escape, but the moments that followed. The kind comments. The casseroles dropped off by strangers. The handwritten notes from women across the country. Few reminded me I'm still here. One had written she had not just told her story. She had rewritten its ending. Her home had changed too. The locks were different now, both literal and metaphorical. She had replaced the hollow fear with grounded peace. The fridge was stocked. The shelves held fresh books and small jars of homemade jam. The pantry in the garage, her new pride was helping others in her neighborhood. People came, left food, took food, left thank you notes. It was community. Not the kind you inherit, but the kind you choose to build. Her granddaughter visited often now. They didn't talk much about the past. Not because it didn't matter, but because the present mattered more. They played cards, cooked together, laughed, and sometimes cried, but always together. Marlene picked up the pen, its weight familiar. She closed her eyes, hearing her own voice from the interview echo softly in her mind. They said I was fragile. But you don't put fragile things in cages. You protect them. I wasn't fragile. I was forgotten. And that's not the same. She let the words settle in the air before writing the final sentence. You can lock a door. But not a voice. She didn't weep. Not anymore. Her tears had been spent like currency, and now she was rich in clarity. Her voice, once silenced, now rang louder than ever, even in stillness. She folded the notebook gently and placed it in a small cedar box, along with old letters, her wedding ring, and a photo of her standing beside her husband in front of this very house decades ago. She whispered to the photo, I kept the promise. I didn't disappear. The wind rustled the trees in response, as if nature itself acknowledged her. Marlene stood up, the blanket slipping off her shoulders. She stepped into her house, hers in name, deed, and soul. She paused by the mirror, smoothed down her hair, and smiled at her reflection. Not because she looked younger, but because she finally looked like herself, and outside. On the porch table, the notebook lay closed. But its story wasn't over. Its story had just begun.